Hello, everybody. This is Anna and Brian from a Marvel podcast, and today we have our next guest for the gaming episode, Kate Edwards, who is CEO of Geogrify and a CXO of SetJetters. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us today. And maybe for our listeners, can you give a quick introduction to yourself and your background so they know your story and how you came?
Yeah, so it's not typical. So I'm a geographer and a cartographer who ended up working in video games. And so here we are in 2025, and this is my 32nd year in video games. And at this point, as of last week, I started working on my 294th game. So it's a lot. And basically what I've done throughout my career over the last 30 plus years is do what I call culturalization work. So effectively what I do is I help game developers avoid making mistakes in their games that have a political or cultural dimension. So this is a bit of a contrast between localization, which is primarily language translation of the text content, but I look at everything else in the game, the character design, the story, the environments, everything, all the elements in the game world, and basically assess whether or not that game world is going to be compatible with the local expectations, and in some cases the local laws that around different kind of content issues. So that's effectively what I do, and it's a job that I made up when I was at Microsoft years ago.
And I guess what got you started on this journey? I guess what was your first experience in gaming that led you to take this path as opposed to staying as a geographer.
Geographer.
It's very similar.
That's okay. My dad was a geologist. I'm the geographer. So, but yeah, it's a weird path because I was working on my interest path is that I wanted to be an astronaut. I did aerospace engineering for a year in college, right out of high school, and I failed miserably because of the calculus, and switched to industrial design because I had a lot of artistic skill, and I wanted to be a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm so I could work on a Star Wars movie. I thought it was like my number one goal. I wanted to work on a Star Wars film so bad. But then after a couple of years of that, which really did improve my skill set with my artistic and design skill set, I just got disenfranchised with that particular program. So I changed my major to geography because I've always loved travel. I always loved maps. I love culture. And plus I could use my artistic skills to make maps. So I went over, changed my major to geography and cartography. Had a great time at it. I loved the subject matter. I got straight A's for the last 2 years of my undergraduate work, which has never happened in my whole academic career. So I was able to get my geography degree, a bachelor's degree in geography, and also a certificate in cartography. And worked for a year as a cartographer at a company called Thomas Brothers Maps, which used to make these map guides that everyone, at least in Western states in the U.S., tended to use, especially in Southern California. That was before Google Maps and all the cool apps we have now. And then I decided I wanted to kind of expand on my subject matter, so I went to grad school, which took me from Southern California to Seattle, and ended up doing my master's thesis on the use of VR for cartography way back in 1991 when VR was hardly even working. But I saw the promise of the tech, and I thought it was super cool. And I was like, yeah, I want to write about how this technology is going to influence the creation of maps and the use of maps. And then finally, while I was doing my PhD, I started my PhD. That's when Microsoft called and said, hey, we need a cartographer to help us on a project over here. And, University of Washington in Seattle is not far from Redmond, where Microsoft headquarters is based. And so I went over there on what was a 6-month contract, and I ended up making all the maps for Encarta Encyclopedia, which was a product that Microsoft used to make. And people of a certain demographic, I think somewhere in like the late 30s to mid 40s, they all grew up with Encarta because it was included with Windows PCs. So they all used it for school because it was all pre-Wikipedia days. And so that was really fun to work on. And I thought it was just going to be 6 months on that project and leave. And then Microsoft said, hey, we need your help on this and we need your help on that. And so after 2 or 3 years of doing contract work, I was offered a full-time position. And they needed help with as with all their mapping products, because as they were pushing into a lot of mapping applications, they needed somebody to help them with the complicated issues on the map, like how do you show Taiwan and how do you show the Gulf of Mexico name and things like that. So, and I could do that based on my background and my expertise. So I was told to create a job description and they will hire me into the role. And that's what I did. So I called myself a geopolitical strategist. And so I became Microsoft's first geopolitical strategist doing this kind of work. Now, that was in 1995. 2 years prior, while I was doing the contract work, I actually had Flight Sim. The Flight Sim team reached out to me to get some cartographic advice for Flight Sim 5.0. So that was in 1993. So that was the very first game I ever worked on in 1993 was Flight Sim. And then I had like a steady stream of some of the early PC games reach out to me for help before I had this formal geopolitical strategist role. But then eventually what happened is we made a big mistake in Encarta World Atlas in South Korea, which became a big front page news issue, and the government was very upset with us. And we fixed the issue, but the government had gone through other Microsoft products looking for other things that were problematic. We did not change everything they asked because some of it was just very political. It wasn't accurate. But then 3 months later, the very first Age of Empires game came out, and Age of Empires included a scenario in Korea that included some of the mistakes that we fixed in Encarta. So you can imagine the South Korean government was very upset with us. And that gave me the idea that we need a team at Microsoft that coordinates this kind of risk across the entire company, because Encarta was based in Redmond at Microsoft headquarters, and Age of Empires was made on Ensemble Studios in Dallas, Texas. So why would these teams even know each other exist, let alone talk to each other? And that, I'm like, well, we can't bear that kind of risk as a company. It's a really big issue for the sales of Windows and Office and all the other Microsoft products. So I wrote a proposal to create a team that I called Geopolitical Strategy. And it took me 7 months pitching it to 5 different VPs. The final VP, the 5th one, he approved it in 5 minutes. All the others had rejected it. But the 5th one approved it very quickly. And I think it's because he was the only VP I talked to who was not from the US. He was from South Africa, and he instantly understood what I was trying to do. And so from that point forward, all of this work that I was doing became formalized as an official process at Microsoft. And I had a team that I created called, and basically that's when my work in games became even more formalized. Now, up to that point, I'd already been kind of informally in the background working on a lot of the Microsoft titles. I'd been working on a ton of stuff, actually, all the Age of Empires and all the PC games like Asheron's Call and Mech Warrior and all that stuff back in the day. But then after my team was formed, that's when I started working pretty much on every Microsoft game that was coming out on Xbox and PC, all the Halos and Fables and Forzas and all that stuff. And that's when I found my true love, because I'm like doing this culturalization work, but on games. I'm like, this brings together absolutely everything I love, which is, technology, creativity. I mean, all of that came together. There was that confluence that I was always looking for, and it happened with games. And so when I left in 2005, I just decided I'm going to become a consultant and I'm going to focus on video games. And so here we are at the end of March of 2025. It will be my 20th year self-employed doing this kind of work still, which it's hard to believe I'm still doing this.
Oh, this is amazing. I love the story, how far you went. And just it's so interesting that you created the position for yourself. But can you tell a little bit more about your recent project, the one you can share about, if you can?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Favorite ones?
Oh, the favorite one is so hard. I'll start with the favorite. So the favorite project, one of my favorite games I've ever worked on, and like I said, 294 games. Which one do I choose? There's ones that are kind of sentimental to me. So like Age of Empires, because I worked on all the original Age of Empires over 25 years ago, and Age of Mythology, and to this day I'm still working on the Age of Empires franchise, helping them with a lot of DLC and other issues. And I'm really happy that the franchise is still going strong. And so it's just kind of bizarre to me that I'm still working on the same franchise all these years later. One of the fun games I worked on back in the day at Microsoft was Jade Empire for BioWare, which was kind of the gateway for me to eventually end up working on all the BioWare games of the last 20 years, all the Mass Effects and Dragon Ages and Star Wars The Old Republic. So I did get to work on a Star Wars project. It wasn't a film, but I still got to work on Star Wars. So that was a big deal for me. The circle had become complete, as they say in Star Wars. But probably one of my most favorite projects I've ever done was very recent, which was the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game. Because as you might tell from my background, I'm kind of a big Indiana Jones fan. And to be able to work on a game that you really identify with and love, you love the character, you love the world, but to get to work on it was phenomenal. So I was responsible for helping them with a lot of the historical accuracy in the game, as well as I brought in subject matter experts as needed onto the project. We had archaeologists from different parts of the world, had a geologist. Even my dad helped to a certain degree with his geologist expertise. So yeah, it was a phenomenal project to work on. It's just so fun, especially to see the reception of the game when it came out in early December. It was just this universal love for the game. And I was there in the room last week at the DICE Awards to see it win Adventure Game of the Year. So that was super cool too. So that's probably one of the most fun projects I've ever done, just because, again, it was kind of all that confluence of things that I really enjoy. And it really had me flexing my culturalization muscles because there was a lot of work to do on that game.
I guess, yeah, like, of all these different types of games that you're producing, what is the key, the gameplay mechanic, I guess, that stands out, that makes you really excited about, these kind of games?
Well, it really depends. I mean, for me, the work that I do is very content oriented. It's not as much focused on game mechanics, because I've worked across pretty much every type of game genre you can imagine. And also scale of games. I've done a lot of indie games as well as a ton of AAA games. I've even done a lot of work on board games and card games, so a lot of analog games as well, which has been really fun. And so it just really depends for me what it's about, the content itself. Like, what's the theme? What's the subject matter? What's the narrative, the story that they're trying to tell? Because pretty much every single game, whether it's a huge AAA game or whether it's a simple mobile game, they're all trying to tell some kind of story. There's some kind of narrative that's in there, even if it's, not that obvious. Like even a match 3 game like Bejeweled Blitz has a narrative behind it, but it's really basic, and it's not really the focus of the game because you're playing a 1-minute game really quickly. But there's still a kind of narrative there. So I'm always looking at what's the narrative, what's the player experience, how does the player experience in their agency within that world that's being created, what does that look like, and how are they going to perceive the world as designed? So I'm really trying to see and anticipate to a certain degree the cultural response to the world that all these developers are making. And so whether or not it's a first-person shooter or RPG or real-time strategy or something else, that may influence at a certain degree, mainly because in different parts of the world, those different genres are received differently. Because you don't see a lot of people playing first-person shooters in Japan, but you see a tremendous amount of people playing RPGs. So you do have to be sensitive to that as well when I work with teams. And they're like, well, we have this great real-time strategy game and we want to sell it in this particular market, but then we have to take a look at whether or not that kind of genre is really popular there or not. And if it's not popular, they might have to do some extra work to try and see how their game is going to resonate with that culture.
I think it's just I started thinking about developers who are trying to actually not even raise awareness but tell a little bit more about their cultural heritage or something like that. Are you working with any kind of like indies, or do you have any piece of advice for those who are developing games right now and it has a lot of like cultural background to like connected to their roots, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the great things about games. I mean, they are an artistic form of self-expression. And so just like film and television and writing and art and everything else, games are an art form that allows us to express ourselves. And that's what I love about the indie space, especially as I travel so much around the world. I travel about 75% of the year, and I visit a lot of emerging markets. And there's game development happening everywhere. And to see people leaning into their own culture, their own folklore, their own stories, and expressing those in games is super exciting to me, because that's part of what games are for. We are the evolution of storytelling, as all these other forms of creative media that have come into existence over the centuries it's great. I mean, we enjoy those still, but games to me are on the cutting edge of how we tell stories and pass those stories from one generation to another. And it's really exciting to me when I see indie developers develop a game that is based on their culture and of course even based on their own life experience in that culture. And I think that's like the most intimate form of expression that we can hope for. And I think it's really powerful, and it's really necessary that we see those games and elevate those games. Obviously discoverability is a huge issue in the indie space, but the more we can embrace the fact that these are very personal stories, or very intimate stories from a certain culture, a certain geographic perspective, or however you want to slice it, there's a space for that, and it's really necessary. So I get really excited about that, because I think that's where a lot of the innovation in the game industry is happening, far more than the AAA level. I mean, granted, at the AAA level, you still see a lot of technical. It's technically phenomenal. I mean, there's the games that come out are so well done. They're so well produced, and it's obvious that they have a lot of resources behind them, but that doesn't always make a great game. We've seen also fantastic games made by one person, who's working in their garage or wherever, trying to make a great game, and it does happen. So I get excited about either, and I look forward. Basically, whatever kind of stories they want to tell, the more personal, the better, because I think that does resonate with people in a much deeper way.
And I guess, I feel like a lot of games are trying to take inspiration from other cultures, when they're building content for the games. And like, where do you, I guess, draw the line with some of this? Because I feel like nowadays the modern audiences are much more sensitive about how people are using culture, and we don't want to overstep our bounds and get into the point of misappropriating another culture. I think right now isn't one of the games that's coming up. I think one of the latest installation for the Assassin's Creed series is getting a lot of bad press about, I guess, how they're representing ancient Japan, and why they're introducing certain characters into the mix when they obviously don't belong in Japan. But it does seem like almost like, something that's just introduced to be, I guess, part of the whole DEI culture. So like, where do you draw the line? How do you balance that?
Well, I think it's really important. We have to look at where the story comes from and what level we want to kind of enter that story and the cultural resonance of that story. I mean, I think Assassin's Creed Shadows is a great example. I've been asked by a lot of people about that game, and in my opinion, with all due respect to Ubisoft, who's been a client of mine, and I love their work and I love Assassin's Creed, I think with this particular one there was a missed opportunity. Because you have not had an Asian protagonist, an East Asian protagonist, I should say, in the Assassin's Creed series since it began. And they're taking a time period of a particular culture, the feudal period of Japan, which is so iconic to Japanese culture. It's pretty much the one historical era of Japanese history that most people around the world have some knowledge of, or they at least identify it when they see it, because it's so iconic. But I think because it is so iconic and it means so much to the Japanese people, I think this was a missed opportunity where the main protagonist should have been someone from Japan. But I think the inclusion of Yosuke as a black samurai, I love that character. I mean, he's not a character. He's a real person. He was a real historical person. And I love the fact that they want to introduce him into that world. But I'm like, well, how about have him as an NPC that you partner with and he helps you out, so you get to know his story. You get to understand his background and his agency within that world and his role in history. So I have no problem with that. I think that would be great. But I think they did miss an opportunity, and I can understand why Japanese players are upset that they're like, but what about us? I mean, this is our period. This is our history. And yet we're not allowed to play as one of us, as a person from our culture in our own history. And that does feel like a little bit of dissonance there in terms of how that might be received. So I don't know what the decision-making process was behind it. I don't blame Ubisoft for picking a character like Yosuke because he is a very interesting character, especially in being in that time period and being in that location. But I think that was a mischance. And so I do think when we're looking at, who our protagonists are, what the cultural setting is or the historical setting, we do have to be very mindful of balancing what kind of unique story we want to tell. And I honestly think that's what they were going for. We want to tell a different story, a story you have not seen before. So if that was their angle, I totally understand that logic. But at the same time, read the room, understand how players in that market, how people in that region will perceive this, and perceive it as they have as a slight. That it's something that why what's wrong with us that you wouldn't have us as being the protagonist? Because when is this opportunity going to come around again for that franchise? Because it's already taken a long time for the franchise to reach East Asia. So what are they going to do next? I don't know. But yeah, so it's we have to weigh those different factors. And of course, there's also a business aspect to it as well. I half would have expected them to set Assassin's Creed in China so that they could sell the game in China or get some kind of interest in China. But that also was walking into quite a minefield because Chinese history is the subject of a lot of games produced in China. And I think a lot of Chinese developers, including and as well as the Chinese government, feels a certain level of distinct ownership. This is our story to tell. It's not your story to tell. And I think that's one of the things we have to be very sensitive about is whose story are we telling? Are we qualified to tell that story? And if we're not, or have we talked with people from that locale to get their take on whether or not this story we want to tell is going to be appropriate? And that's part of the process I go through all the time with my culturalization work. I spend a lot of time talking with people from the different markets, hopefully as upstream as possible in the development process, because unlike localization, which typically has to wait later in the product cycle for the text content to be mostly complete, I do a lot of work early on projects in the concept phase because I'm helping them navigate a lot of the potential sensitivity issues really early. I read the early versions of the script. I look at the concept art for the characters and the environments and everything else so that I can guide them very early and make any course corrections necessary, because it's obviously much cheaper and easier to do it in concept phase rather than getting into production and start, and then you realize later in production that, oh my gosh, we should not be doing this. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. Even though some of the clients I work with, I am brought in on a project very late because they want me to help fix a mistake that they realize that they've made. So, but my job is to try and get them to think earlier about this, because the earlier the better.
And I think you mentioned as well that you travel a lot. So during that travel, do you have some specific time, just like, okay, I want to go and explore, talk to locals and just trying to observe how does it work? Can you guide us through
Yeah. Well, yeah, I travel a lot because I get asked to speak at a lot of events, mostly game industry events, but not entirely. So it just depends. I mean, my travel schedule gets quite busy. It was already busy this year. I've been gone, we're in the 7th week or 6th week. I don't remember. We're like in the 7th week, I think, of the year, and I've already been gone for 4 weeks this year. So it's been busy. But when I travel, I mean, I take advantage of the opportunity because I want to interact with people locally, especially if it's a place I've never been before. I mean, I will jump on that immediately. Just in the last year or so, I've been to Kyrgyzstan and Moldova and Albania and places like that, where it's just been so eye-opening. It's just been phenomenal to have that experience and to talk with the developers there and get to know, what are their struggles, what are their interests, what are their goals. I have a lot of those conversations with them, and we will have conversations about cultural representation as well, because I want to understand how do they feel about their culture and about their culture being expressed. But of course, the other hobby I have, which we kind of were starting to touch on earlier, was the fact that when I do travel, if I have free time, I like to get out and explore the culture, but I also like to visit filming locations, because that's a huge geeky hobby of mine that I've had since I was a teenager growing up in Southern California. And that's what led me during COVID to partner with a few other co-founders, and we created an app called SetJetters, which is a film tourism app. So we basically turned my passion for visiting filming locations into an app. And it's been going really well, and we've been making a lot of partnerships with like film commissions and tourism boards, and kind of spreading the love of film tourism, because it's become a really big deal these days.
I think it's kind of like because everyone wants to dive into, like, get closer to those universes, games, films, and just like history. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it, I think, is because of the emotional connection we have to the media that we consume. Because we consume film and television and all these things, music or whatever it might be, and we form that emotional connection to it because it might have happened during a certain time of our life, and it brings up memories, or it's just something that really moves us or inspired us. I mean, I'll never forget when I visited the Lars Homestead location in southern Tunisia, which is where they filmed the original Star Wars way back when, which is, Luke Skywalker's house. And when I was visiting it, I remember walking towards the structure because it's still there. It's still there over, 45 years later. It's still standing, even though fans have often had to go and repair it and keep it alive. But it was like a religious experience. I was weak in the knees. I was tearing up because I could not believe that I was standing in the very place where they filmed this movie that has had such a huge influence on me over the years. And so it was quite an experience. And I've had that kind of similar vibe in different places I have visited around the world. Like Lawrence of Arabia, for example, is one of my favorite films. And so visiting Wadi Rum in Jordan, where they filmed it, was phenomenal. They've used Wadi Rum for a lot of stuff, The Martian, Dune, tons of other movies. But it was a pretty amazing experience.
I think it's even like Lawrence of Arabia. They filmed something in like St. Paul, like in London. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the fun of it, because like if you open the app in London, I mean, because London is used for so many films and TV shows, it's like almost every corner seems to have a filming location.
And do you have any hopes and predictions for the future of like the gaming industry in your own projects?
I think that my hope is an easy one, that we're going to pull out of this nosedive that we're currently in, where the industry is struggling. We've seen a tremendous amount of layoffs, and a lot of companies are trying to adjust to how they develop games. I do think it's a healthy process. I don't like that it's affected so many people, but I think it's been a long time coming that the industry needs to face up to how they develop games and what's the sustainability of creating these massive projects. I mean, yeah, if you're Grand Theft Auto 6, you don't have to worry because they're going to make a ton of money very quickly on that game. But that's such a rarity these days, and even that's not a guarantee. But, there's certain franchises that'll probably keep making money no matter what. But, the sustainability of spending literally hundreds of millions to make a AAA game, which is on the same cost or more than making like a giant Marvel movie, that's crazy. That amount of money that it takes. And so we really have to think about the economics of game development. And I do think we still need to figure out a better route to discoverability of games, because I don't think as an industry we are helping non-game players discover the games medium. Because people say, well, yeah, just go to Steam, point your friends to Steam and have them look for something. How do you find something on Steam when there's 1,000 new games a week, something like that? It's crazy. And so you have to, I think we need to do a better job of curating and guiding people for essentially what's the entry point into games? How do you start playing games and how do you find the games that you love? So I do think my prediction, though, even though we're in this state right now and we're kind of churning a bit, I do think we're going to start pulling out of it because I want to say it's hit bottom. I don't know for sure, but I think it's reached a point of kind of the lower part of this curve where a lot of companies are starting to understand they can't avoid the issue and they have to think about how this is going to work. And so as we move through this year, I think this year is still going to be tough, but moving into 2026, I think we'll probably start seeing a little bit of an upturn because companies are going to have to pivot to a certain degree. They can't wait much longer. I mean, they can't spend 2 or 3 years pivoting. They've got to do it quick. So I do hope to see that we're going to have a bit of an upturn again. And we'll just kind of see. This might be, as some people have been predicting, a kind of a second rise of the indie developer as we had about 10 years ago. We'll see. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not as I don't have the wisdom, I think, to predict exactly where we're going to be, because there's also the whole political and cultural dimension to all of this too that is extremely unpredictable right now. So
I think that's a fair statement. I personally feel like indies are probably coming up with the more interesting creative titles these days. I do feel like the AAA games are all almost following an established formula. And if you're looking for sort of exciting new things, indie is probably where it's at. I think we're coming to the end of the podcast. So I'd like to leave the last minute or so for yourself. Okay, just for any last words to our listeners, and also how can they, if they want to learn more about sort of what you get up to, and or if they have any questions, how can they reach out? Where can they find you?
Well, I think probably the best way, my Geogrify website is still being redone at the moment. So I think the best way is just find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find there. You can connect with me there. If you have any questions about any of the issues we've talked about, I'm more than happy to follow up with an answer. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you're curious about SetJetters, you can go to SetJetters.com or just go to your Android or iOS store and just find the app there. And it's SetJetters, not Jet Setters, just to be clear. And if you're curious, you can check that out and try it if you want to play around with it. And I would also just say that, because of the kind of the pessimism that some people have, I mentor a lot of people coming into this industry, and I would just encourage them to have hope. Don't give up on the dream of working in the game industry. I mean, like I said, I've been in this over 30 years. There's been a lot of ups and downs in 30 years. It's been challenging. This is not the first time. And so this industry will prevail. It will come out of it. We are still the largest form of entertainment on earth, and that's not going to stop. So I would just encourage you to keep moving. And for anyone who did lose their job or they're still looking, the key there is to stay active, work on something, improve your skills, do what you need to do to keep moving forward, even as you're looking for the next thing, because it's really important. Don't let yourself stagnate while you're waiting.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for those words. And I think it's just it could be really inspiring for people in this industry. And I really enjoyed the conversation with you. You have amazing story, how you managed to turn around. And if people didn't realize, you actually have a hat, because we mentioned the Indiana Jones. Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, that is actually not just a Indiana Jones hat. That is a Herbert Johnson. Herbert Johnson in London is the company that made the hats for the films. So I've got my original. This is based on Raiders Lost Ark. So
there you go.
my whip I use for cosplay. It's somewhere in a box. So.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that episode. But
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this point. And have a great day.